Welcome to Breathing for Better Sleep with Dr. Fredek, the show that explores natural solutions for snoring, sleep apnea, and childhood sleep struggles without CPAP or surgery. Today, we're kicking off with Dr. X's personal story and the root cause focused approach that is helping thousands finally sleep better and live better. Let's jump in. Before we dive into the science, take us back to the beginning. Where were you born and raised? What's the personal reason you care so deeply about helping people breathe better?
I was born in Springfield, Illinois. I grew up in Florida. I moved there as a child, so I pretty much have spent most of my life in Florida, Southwest Florida. And the whole reason why I have a passion for sleep and got involved in sleep was really revolves around two things. Well, the first thing is my father. I got out of college. I was 28 years old. My father had his first heart attack at 26. And so when I got out of school, I was doing research to figure out what could be, root cause of why my father would have a heart attack at such a young age. And I came to the conclusion after doing all my research that it could potentially be sleep apnea. And so I had my father get a test. And of course, he came back positive for severe sleep apnea. And you fast forward, I started treating sleep in 2002. So I've been treating sleep for about 23 years. And after treating sleep for about 5, 6 years, I was at a conference and I was given a sleep test to do at this conference in my hotel room. It was the first time we had these disposable tests that you could just do and throw away. So they gave us all the doctors at this conference one to do at the hotel that night. I assumed I didn't have a problem because I was skinny, a long distance runner, healthy. So I made the assumption I did not have sleep apnea. I did the sleep test, and the next day we're going over results, and it turns out I had severe sleep apnea. I stopped breathing over 400 times, 58 times a minute. So there was 58 times an hour. So there was pretty much not a minute that went by that I didn't stop breathing. And so for somebody treating sleep apnea who didn't even know themselves had sleep apnea, kind of drove me to figure out why. And that's where my journey began.
And was there a particular moment where you realized that this wasn't just about sleep, it was about saving lives?
With my father's extensive cardiovascular history, I knew once that was diagnosed and the problem, I realized quickly how it can affect us. And then one of my first 5 patients I treated, a gentleman named Tony. He was an existing patient who was on a CPAP machine, had severe sleep apnea and hated a CPAP machine. And so I said, I just got into this. If you don't like your machine, why don't we try an oral appliance and some of these other things? And he's like, yeah, I hate my machine. I don't like it. I wear it because the doctor said I have to. He was overweight. He had diabetes. He had blood pressure problems. That was all linked to his sleep apnea, which is why he was treating it. I said, okay, let's make you an appliance. We made him an appliance. And he was so happy. He's like, I sleep so much better and feel so much better wearing this appliance. And he goes, my wife hates the snoring. She sleeps in a different room because of the snoring. And I still snore even with my CPAP machine. And with this appliance, I don't snore and I feel better. So we did his updated sleep test 3 months or so after he got his appliance. And it came back that he was improved and he felt better. But medically, in order to be considered successful, your number of events of where you stop breathing, your apnea events, have to get down to a certain level, and he wasn't there. So I said, I know you feel better, but you may have to continue your CPAP. And he says, absolutely not. I threw that thing away. I'm never going back. And I said, well, Tony, we gotta get you to where the numbers are right. And so this gentleman did everything he could do to make that happen. He was an obese guy, so he lost weight and got healthier. And we finally did an updated sleep test where his numbers were great. And so he was so happy, his wife was so happy. And that's the moment where I realized, we can make such an impact on people and that the CPAPs aren't always working. He had a CPAP and it wasn't working for him. What they call AHI number, his times he stopped breathing number was great, but he didn't feel good. He still snored. And that's when I was like, yeah, we can really help these people.
Dr. Eck, you've built a practice around something most doctors overlooked in general, the airway. What made you go against the grain?
I mean, at that point, especially once I got diagnosed with sleep apnea, most pulmonologists who treat sleep disorders do not even screen inside their own practices for sleep apnea. So realize a pulmonologist, for the most part, sleep apnea is a part of their practice, but they treat COPD and all kinds of other stuff. And unless somebody comes in and says, I think I got sleep apnea or I snore or whatever, they don't even screen. So most physicians, most dentists, most chiropractors do not screen for sleep apnea. It's the most underdiagnosed problem we have in medicine. We treat so many conditions in medicine that have a root cause: plastic surgery, dental problems, childhood development, diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety, depression, all of these things. And all of these things have a root cause. And very often it is sleep apnea or sleep disordered breathing. Sleep apnea is only, by the way, one of more than 60 sleep disorders. I decided to take a functional medicine approach, holistic, natural approach by focusing on root cause of all of these problems. And if we can get to the bottom of what's causing these problems, then we can eliminate of a lot of these problems, a lot of these medications by treating the root cause. And for many of these patients, it is sleep apnea.
Was there a time where you felt like you were shouting into the void? Like you were seeing something that nobody else was seeing?
Pretty much always. And I'm telling you, I believe that is now more than ever. We have so much information coming out about medical and dental issues, and we keep holding on to the 80s and 90s and early 2000s science and knowledge. We have so much new information coming out in the last 10 years that we can't ignore. And we have evidence now that the CPAP is not even decreasing the evidence of heart disease. Sleep apnea, by the way, and sleep disorders in general are fairly new science, new area of medicine. CPAP was only invented in 1980, and we've treated cardiovascular disease and dental problems and psychiatry and all this stuff for hundreds of years. But sleep apnea is a fairly new medicine. So there's so much new every 5 years. There's such a change. And what's happening is everybody is just basing all their decisions on the initial research from the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, and not paying attention to the new stuff. So it's like everybody's got blinders on. So yeah, now is as bad as any time.
And why do you think that is, Dr. Eck? Why do you think that something so important such as sleep is just being left behind in terms of doctors adapting to new knowledge, new research, new understanding?
I just think that most people in healthcare, they get so stuck on what they know, they just do not take the time, the effort, the energy to learn. I spend over 100 hours a year with continuing education and learning all the newest stuff. And I think most people just don't do that. They just stick to what they know and don't jump on board or even try to get aware of the new information.
Yeah, that's unfortunate because sleep is such a vital aspect of our well being.
It affects our whole body, it affects every system in our body, and it's just so important. And it's just never become, and to this day, back to that point, it's still not in the forefront of medicine as the root cause of all of these problems.
And because doctors that treat, like you mentioned, pulmonologist or any other doctor that is addressing sleep disorders, is still in the past in terms of how to treat it. Most people say, oh, I snore, I'm tired, I just need CPAP. Like what is really wrong with that picture?
Because that's what was originally created as the solution. And by the way, the CPAP was never designed for a human. The first CPAP in 1980 was actually designed for a dog. And that got then translated. So a doctor had a dog. I think it was a pit bull or a pug, and it snored, and it slept with him in the room. So he took a vacuum cleaner, reversed it, customized the mask so the dog didn't snore. That's how we got into this. And now they translated that to humans. And that's just been the ongoing theme is the CPAP machine.
That's so interesting. My dad actually has severe sleep apnea and he's had it for over 40 years and the doctors would always want to give him CPAP and he really hates it because he says he can't sleep, is very aggressive, and also he doesn't feel like it actually improves his sleep quality.
It's a very common complaint that people that wear CPAPs, they wear them because their doctor tells them to wear them, but many times it's actually not working for them.
And when you say that, for example, sleep apnea isn't just about how tired you are, but it's a progressive whole body issue. Can you explain what that means? Or why is it a whole body issue?
Sleep apnea affects every system in the body. So the number of times you stop breathing, which is the number we get on a sleep test, is one thing. But all the other things that happen, oxygen going down, stages of sleep not being proper, these are the things that create entire body health concerns. And if you look at some simple stuff like anxiety and depression, high blood pressure, diabetes, so many of these things, their root cause is sleep apnea, AFib, bedwetting in children, ADD and ADHD in children, dementia and Alzheimer's in adults. 90% of people with Alzheimer's or dementia have sleep apnea. Almost 80% of people who have head and neck cancer, which means from the neck up cancer, have sleep apnea. So it affects our entire body, and it is a chronic inflammatory disorder. So inflammation throughout the entire body goes up. Hormones we cannot control if we do not stay in deep sleep long enough. And if we can't control hormones, one hormone or the other controls every system in the body. So it affects every single system in the body if we're not sleeping correctly.
How do you think this originates? Why is it so overlooked if it's so important? How does this sleep disorders originate? Are people born with it? Is it a lifestyle situation? Or why do people get sleep apnea or any sleep disorder?
People can develop sleep disorders early in life, young. We treat kids as starting at 4 years old. But the problem is nobody screens for sleep apnea. Nobody screens for it. So if you go to the doctor and get your annual physical, they do your blood work, they do your blood pressure, they check for diabetes, they check for high blood pressure, they check for all of these things. But nobody screens on a regular basis for a sleep disorder. Nobody does it. Not even most pulmonologists do it. And you can't just tell by looking at somebody, and that's the biggest problem we have. Most people look and say, okay, if you're a 300-pound person with a 17-inch neck, then you might have sleep apnea. But that is not the only people that have sleep apnea. So the problem is we're missing too many people because we do not screen.
Dr. Eck, you often use the garden hose analogy. Can you walk us through that for someone who's never heard it before?
So the analogy that I use with pretty much every patient I see is if I have a garden hose and it has a kink in it, I have two options. One is to go unkink the hose. So when it comes to treating airway, if we can unkink the hose, essentially open up the airway, right? That's how we get resolution of a sleep disorder. The other option I have with that garden hose is to leave the kink in the hose. And if I leave the kink in the hose and don't actually fix the problem, okay, all I do is go over to the faucet and turn the water pressure up as high as it will go. Now I'm just pushing as much water through the kink as possible. Well, this is the problem with CPAP. That's all the CPAP is doing. You're not fixing anything. You're leaving all the kinks there, all the narrowing and restrictions in the airway, and you're just putting a mask on somebody, turning up the pressure to a point that it forces air down the kinks that are there. And we do the opposite. We try to eliminate the kink. We try to open up the airways.
Dr. Could you tell if a person or could you suspect that a person has sleep disorders according to how much they dream or how active their dreams are?
So the dreaming happens in a very specific stage of sleep called REM sleep. So during REM sleep is when you dream. So if somebody doesn't dream, they're probably not getting into REM sleep. But this is one of the big problems is that doctors are looking at people and trying to gauge whether or not they might have a sleep disorder by physically just looking at them. And all they're looking at is size. They're looking at weight, neck size. And you can't do that. There are so many people that have sleep disorders that are skinny. You can't look at somebody and tell that way. There are things. So when I got diagnosed with sleep apnea, I took myself as a case study and said, okay, what is it that contributed to my sleep apnea? It's like the kink in the hose, right? We know what's stopping the water flow. What is it in my case that was stopping the airflow? And I took my case and said, okay, these things are contributing. And so I've created, and I lecture a lot, and I coach doctors on how to do sleep screenings and look for these 8, 9, 10 things. Because you can actually look for at things for people and get a good idea that they have sleep apnea. But it can't just be about weight. There's lots of things that we can look at that can give us an idea. And a lot of that is medical history. A lot of it is asymmetries in the face. In kids, by the way, orthodontically, if they have underdeveloped jaws and orthodontic problems, they probably have an airway problem. They're mouth breathing. A child that mouth breathes is growing narrow and vertical. They're not growing where they're supposed to. So there are things we can look at, but these aren't things that most people are even looking for.
I take it so many kids go to the dentist or people in general, but how many dentists actually know that if there are people with narrow jaws, as you mentioned, could potentially be experiencing a sleep disorder? And how do this dentist channel these people per se to you?
In kids, it's so important that we pay attention with the kids because we treat so many adults with sleep apnea. And if you treat a child that has a breathing disorder and fix it, they do not grow up to be an adult with sleep apnea. And there's things you can look for in kids. ADHD, all these kids, and this is one of the analogies that I use is if a child is 4 years old and is used to getting a nap and they don't get their nap, how do they act all afternoon? Not good, right? If they act like that all day, what happens? They get diagnosed with ADD or ADHD. And 75% of these kids don't have ADD. They have a sleep disordered breathing. They're not getting into REM sleep. And if you don't get into REM sleep, you could sleep 10 hours and you're going to be tired. You're going to be grumpy. You're going to act out. Bedwetting beyond years that it's supposed to happen. Alterations in the physical development or asymmetries in the jaws or the face, eyes, etc. Orthodontic problems, grinding, mouth breathing, chronic ear problems is a classic sign. A child with chronic ear issues, needing to get tubes put in their ears, that's a classic sign of sleep disordered breathing.
This is so interesting and so important. And I like it that you made such a clear point about it because people really need to hear this. Like you said, so many people are being undiagnosed because they go to the doctor for a certain particular issue and they're not being treated for the root cause. So maybe these people still think that they have an issue, constantly ear issue, or maybe their insulin levels are of whack or anything. But it's incredible that people go misdiagnosed with certain symptoms and never know how to address it. So, what would you say to the listeners so they know that they need to go to sleep specialists like bedwetting for kids, ADHD, ADD, dental structure?
Grinding, mouth breathing. Watch your child when they're sleeping. They fall asleep in the back seat of the car. Is their mouth open? That's abnormal. As humans, we are designed to breathe through our nose. If we breathe through our mouth while we're still growing, we will develop skeletal problems, which exacerbates or creates sleep apnea. So we're not supposed to breathe through our mouth. We're supposed to breathe through our nose. So if your child has their mouth open at all while they're sleeping, that's abnormal.
That's very interesting because I've seen people in general, kids, many kids sleeping with their mouths open, and also adults that are sleeping with their mouths open, even if they're not snoring, but they just have their mouth open. So we often think that if they're snoring, maybe they have a sleep disorder, but if they're not snoring, they don't. But in truth is if they have their mouths open, that means they're mouth breathing, and that could potentially mean that there's a sleep disorder, right?
If they're mouth breathing, they most likely have a sleep disorder or what we call myofunctional problem. So that's abnormal. And there's many books out there on this subject.
Having said all this, Dr. Ed, what do you hope changes in this field in the next 5, 10 years?
Everything has to start with education. So getting out and doing this is one of the ideas of getting out and educating and letting the world know how important sleep is, but then also how to look for it. Okay. Getting doctors and people in healthcare to understand the current science. The science in the last 10 years is tremendously different than what it was 20 years ago and 23 years ago when I started treating sleep. Everybody has the impression that treating sleep apnea only involves a CPAP or surgery. And that's the only successful way to do it. And if you talk to pulmonologists, most of them are going to tell you that the only way to treat is a CPAP if you want the most success. And it's absolutely not true. If you look at CPAP, the best study ever done shows a 56, 58% success rate. Well, we have precision appliances and myofunctional therapy combinations that are approaching 90% success. But most physicians are not aware of this. They're just looking at the old data. They're not paying attention to the new stuff. And it all starts at the beginning, education and getting the public to know that there's options. So many people are going untreated. 80% of people with a sleep disorder are going undiagnosed and untreated. And the reason is because one, nobody's screening for it. And secondly, if your doctor says you might have a sleep problem, so many people don't even bother to get tested because in their mind, the only option is a mask that they don't want. So they don't even go get tested, even if their doctor tells them they need it. So if we want to fix this problem, we have to get the education out there that one, there are options. There's lots of options. Secondly, start early. Start looking at children because that's where it starts. When I see a patient that comes in who stops breathing 400 times a night, they didn't start at 400 times a night. There was a time they started at 2 times a night and 4 times a night. And you know when it started? When they were a child. So if we can get and fix this while they're young, we can prevent all of these adults that have sleep apnea and the lifetime of medical problems that comes from having sleep apnea.
Dr. Eck, just to clarify, can you give us a brief explanation of what a myofascial treatment? Is that what you were?
Myofunctional.
Myofunction.
So myofunctional are things like a tongue tie. So your tongue cannot posture. So as a human, we are supposed to breathe with our mouth closed, breathe through our nose, and our tongue should rest against our palate, all the way up forward, right behind our front teeth. Well, if you have a tongue tie, which means the muscle underneath your tongue is too long or too tight, it doesn't let your tongue get up there. And that's a very, very common problem. And there's countries where that is evaluated at birth. In this country, it used to be evaluated at birth. It's not anymore. They don't pay attention to it. And the reason is because breastfeeding is very important for developing the muscles of the mouth. And in this country, we don't do a lot of breastfeeding anymore. And we definitely don't do it for very long, even if we do it. And so a lot of times that tongue tie problem comes from the child not being able to breastfeed properly. And since a lot of people don't breastfeed anymore, we miss it on a lot of people. And that's a simple, easy solution. When we treat kids, it's all about treating myofunctional and getting rid of the mouth breathing and developing nasal breathing. And if you do that, they will then start to grow properly and you will fix the underdeveloped jaws. You will fix the hormone problems. You will fix and prevent a lot of orthodontic problems. So the myofunctional stuff is very, very important.
Wow, this is very eye-opening, Dr. Eck. Thank you for all these insights. I'm excited for the next episode. And to all the listeners, thanks for listening to Breathing for Better Sleep. And if this episode helped you, share it with someone you care about. To learn more or work with Dr. Eck, visit sleeptreatmentdirect.com. Thank you, Dr. Eck.